Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. This is not the story I thought I'd ever tell. But here it is. You're so lucky someone even tolerates you. That was the sentence that ended the version of my life I thought was real. It was meant as a joke, I think. Delivered with wine-soaked lips, over soft jazz in a kitchen filled with laughter and designer cheese. My wife, Trina, was holding court like she always does. Gleaming smile, perfectly timed eye rolls, that effortless ability to make people adore her while quietly cutting me down one comment at a time. I was supposed to be in the car. That's the worst part. She asked me to grab her phone charger. I said sure, because I always say sure. But I came back. Quietly. I walked up the steps and paused just outside the kitchen, just long enough to hear my name twisted into something I didn't recognize. I mean, I'm only with him out of pity. Who else would want Carlton? There was laughter. Actual, uncontrolled laughter. My stomach turned. Not because it was cruel. I'd heard cruel. But because it was real. That was the honest version of her. The one behind the Instagram photos. The one behind the obligatory birthday cards. But then, something happened. A voice broke through the laughter. Calm. Clear. Unapologetic. Well, I do. Silence. Long, stretching silence. I leaned against the wall. My chest felt tight, but I wasn't sure if it was pain or shock or something else entirely. I couldn't move. Cassie, Trina's best friend. The one who always looked at me like I was more than what Trina painted me as. The one who once fixed my broken glasses without telling anyone. The one who asked about my old poetry. The poetry Trina told people was Carlton's cringy teenage phase. Cassie wasn't laughing. She said it again, this time softer, but louder in meaning than anything I'd ever heard. I do. Then footsteps. Then the door creaked. She saw me standing there, eyes wide, hands shaking. I looked ridiculous, I know. I always do. But she didn't laugh. She walked up, looked right into me. Not at me, into me. And she took my hand. No words. Just warmth. Like her hand had weight and intention and the kind of grounding you don't realize you've missed until it's there. Behind us, I heard Trina scoff. God, you're embarrassing, she muttered. Even now you can't handle being in the same room without clinging to someone. I turned my head, slowly. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Because whatever story I'd been trapped in before, the one where I was the joke, the background, the tolerated husband, it ended in that moment. And a new one had just begun. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept hearing the words on repeat. Not my wife's, but Cassie's. I do. That quiet voice, so steady, like she had been holding it in for years and chose that exact moment to let it escape. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a cry for attention. It was a simple truth. One that shattered everything I thought I knew. I lay there next to Trina, wide awake, while she snored peacefully like nothing had happened. No remorse, no guilt. She hadn't even looked in my direction after Cassie walked away with me. Just carried on with the party, chatting and smiling like I wasn't the guy she just humiliated in front of her friends. And Cassie? She left shortly after that moment. Said she had an early shift. She didn't even glance back, but her hand had lingered in mine just long enough to plant something in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Worth. The next morning, Trina acted like nothing happened. She asked if I could pick up oat milk from the store, then rolled over and started scrolling through her phone. No mention of the night before. No acknowledgement. I didn't bring it up either. I couldn't. I was afraid she'd brush it off as a joke again, and I couldn't bear to be laughed at twice in 24 hours. I left the house, but I didn't go to the store. I drove around for nearly 2 hours. No music. Just the sound of the engine and the occasional turn signal clicking through the silence. I didn't know where I was going. My hands were on the wheel, but my mind was stuck in that kitchen, stuck in that moment where my wife confirmed what I had suspected for years, and someone else challenged it without hesitation. Eventually, my car found its way to the park. The same park Cassie and I once bumped into each other during the early pandemic walks, back when people smiled with their eyes above masks. I remember that day so clearly now. She brought her dog, some small white fluffball named Bernie. I had just lost my job back then, and Trina had mocked me for being overdramatic about it. I remember Cassie listened for an hour, nodding, genuinely invested in what I was saying. That day, I remember thinking Cassie's the kind of person who hears silence and still knows when to ask what's wrong. I pulled into a spot near the duck pond and stared out at the water, trying to figure out what to do. That's when my phone buzzed. Cassie, hey, are you okay? Just 3 words. But I swear, it felt like she reached through the screen and touched my spine. I stared at the message for minutes, unsure how to respond. My thumbs hovered. Then I typed back. I don't know. I heard everything. 3 dots appeared, then stopped, then reappeared. She was typing, deleting, typing again. Then, good. You were supposed to. My pulse picked up. I asked her what she meant. She responded almost instantly. I've watched her hollow you out for years. You deserve to know you're not invisible. At least not to me. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there, completely still, as if any movement would break the spell. For once, someone had acknowledged what I had been too afraid to say out loud. I was dying inside. And someone saw it. We agreed to meet later that afternoon. Not in secret, not in a motel, not in some ridiculous movie scene way. Just at the coffee shop near the bookstore. The place Trina never goes because the chairs aren't ergonomic. I got there first. Waited. Watched the door every time it opened. And when Cassie walked in, wearing that same navy blue jacket I remembered from the park, everything inside me changed. It wasn't about falling in love. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't messy. It was quiet. It was truth. She sat across from me, looked me in the eyes, and said, I think you've been told a lie for so long, you started believing it. And that's when she told me something that shook me more than anything Trina had ever said. She knew things. Things about my marriage. Things Trina had hidden. Choices she had made. Texts. Calls. Conversations Cassie was never supposed to overhear. My hands trembled on the coffee cup. I had only scratched the surface last night. Cassie had just opened the door to everything beneath it. And it was darker than I ever imagined. Cassie didn't waste time with pleasantries. She sat across from me in that booth with both hands wrapped around a coffee she barely touched, and when I asked her how long she'd known something was wrong, she looked at me like I had asked the most naive question in the world. How long have you known, Carlton? She said softly. I didn't answer, because deep down, I think I always knew. But it's one thing to feel unloved. It's another thing to hear your wife call you pathetic in a room full of people while sipping Sauvignon Blanc. Cassie exhaled and looked out the window for a long moment before speaking again. Trina tells people you cry at dog commercials. Like, she laughs about it. Makes it this running joke that you're just a big emotional marshmallow. I lowered my eyes. She wasn't wrong. I do. I cry when animals are happy. I cry when people reunite at airports. I cried when I saw a kid hug his dad after losing a soccer game. And Trina used to call that sweet. But I guess sweet turns sour when you're too tired to pretend anymore. Cassie turned back to me, her voice barely above a whisper. She said once that loving you felt like babysitting a wounded puppy. That you always needed reassurance, always second-guessed yourself, always looked for signs she was proud of you. I looked up. Her eyes were full, not with pity, with frustration. Anger. Real, deep, protective anger. And I told her she didn't deserve you. That stunned me. It was the first time I had heard anyone say it out loud. I wasn't used to hearing anyone speak up for me, especially not behind closed doors. Then she dropped the part that made my blood run cold. She's been seeing someone. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just froze. Like my body knew what to do, but my brain hadn't caught up yet. Cassie didn't flinch. She laid it out slowly, carefully, like she was unwrapping a bomb. It started about a year ago. Some guy from her work, Nolan, I think. She told me it wasn't serious, that it was just for fun, that you'd never find out because, quote, Carlton's too busy watering plants and organizing our spice rack alphabetically. I felt something twist in my stomach. I do organize the spice rack. I do it because Trina once said it made the kitchen feel calmer. I did it to make her happy. Cassie continued. She promised she'd end it before it went too far. Said she just needed to feel wanted again. But it did go too far. And when I found out she was still with him last month, I told her I'd cut her off completely if she didn't come clean to you. My voice barely came out. And she didn't. Cassie shook her head. She said you'd be devastated. And that she didn't want the drama. Her words, not mine. I sat there, my hands in fists on my lap, not from anger, but from trying to hold myself together. Because in that moment, the worst part wasn't that my wife had cheated on me. It was that she didn't think I was worth the effort of telling. Cassie reached across the table and placed her hand on mine again. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't an advance. It was what you give someone at a funeral, The kind of handhold you use when something has died, and you're trying to remind them they're still alive. She's not going to stop, Cassie said quietly. She gets away with it because you always stay. Because you keep believing that the version of her you first fell in love with is going to come back. And she was right. I stayed every time she yelled at me over a forgotten chore. I stayed when she mocked my clothes in front of her coworkers. I stayed when she told her mother I was passionless. I stayed because I thought marriage meant working through the hard parts. But this wasn't marriage. This was survival on one side and sabotage on the other. We sat there in silence for a while. Then Cassie said something that shocked me almost more than the affair. I'm not telling you this so you'll leave her for me. I looked up, confused. I'm telling you this because you need to leave her for you. And that was when I broke. Right there, in that quiet coffee shop filled with background chatter and the clinking of mugs, I cried. Not because my marriage was falling apart, but because for the first time, I realized it had been broken for a long, long time. Cassie didn't move. She just sat with me, held my hand, let me cry, and when I finally caught my breath, she said something that hit me like a train. She said no one would ever want you, but I think she's terrified you'll figure out that's not true. I drove home like a man rehearsing grief, not just because I was devastated, but because I knew the moment I walked through that door, I had to act like everything was normal. Like I hadn't just found out my wife was sleeping with someone else. Like I hadn't just been told that she'd been describing me to her friends as a walking disappointment. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed to understand just how deep this betrayal went. Trina was already home when I walked in, sitting cross-legged on the couch, wearing one of those soft lounge sets she only put on when she knew she wouldn't be leaving the house. She glanced at me once, then back at her phone, thumb scrolling fast like nothing in her reality required pause or reflection. "Did you get the oat milk?" she asked, without lifting her eyes. I mumbled something about the store being closed. It wasn't, obviously, but she didn't press. She never did when it came to the small lies, probably because she assumed mine would never compare to hers. That night I couldn't sleep, not because I was sad, but because I was starting to realize how easily she had built her world on top of mine. Like my life was a foundation she walked over without ever checking if it was cracking underneath her. I kept thinking about what Cassie had said. You need to leave her for you. The words wouldn't leave my head. The next day, while Trina was at a team-building hike with coworkers, and yes, I checked her calendar app just to confirm that Nolan, her affair partner, was attending too. I made a decision. I was going to find out everything. I started with her office upstairs. She never let me in there, claimed it was too cluttered for me to step into, which always struck me as odd since I'm the cleanest person in the house. The door was unlocked. The desk was spotless. Her laptop was gone. No surprise, she took it with her, but the drawers were full. Organized. Precise. Too precise. In the back of the bottom drawer, behind an old calendar and a worn folder labeled tax stuff, I found it. A small black notebook. Thick paper. Real ink writing. She always said she hated writing things by hand. Apparently, that was a lie too. I opened it. The first few pages were harmless. Goals, ideas, random affirmations she clearly copied from Pinterest. But by page 6, my skin went cold. It was titled, Exit Plan, in case things go sideways. My name was mentioned 3 times in the first paragraph. She had detailed how she'd slowly moved most of our joint savings into a secondary account. It had been going on for over 18 months, small transfers, labeled as utilities or credit card payoffs. I never noticed because she handled the bills. She insisted on it, said it made her feel financially competent. She also mentioned a private lease. A condo, paid 6 months in advance. No address listed, just the initials N.B., which I assumed meant Nolan's building. Then came the part that made me feel like my heart had stopped mid-beat. Carlton will be fine. He won't fight it. He's too passive. He folds when challenged. That's the advantage. Let him believe it's mutual. Let me believe it's mutual. She didn't just betray me emotionally or physically. She anticipated my silence. She counted on it. She didn't just cheat. She played chess with my dignity, betting I'd never even notice I was losing. I sat on the edge of our bed for hours that night. She came home, kissed me on the forehead like I was her aging grandfather and not the man she promised her life to. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't ready to confront her, not yet. Because now, I had a secret too, and I needed time to figure out how to use it. Trina's kiss on my forehead that night stayed with me longer than it should have. It wasn't affectionate. It was rehearsed, like muscle memory. The same way someone pets a dog they don't care about anymore, but still feel obligated to feed. That kiss confirmed everything I'd read in her notebook. The calculated planning, the manipulation, the quiet dismantling of our marriage, one transaction, one insult, one tiny act of emotional erosion at a time. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I was done reacting. I was done being predictable. Cassie's words echoed again. Not the comforting ones, but the ones that hurt the most because they were true. She's not going to stop, Carlton. She gets away with it because you always stay. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to explode or yell or humiliate her like she did me. I just wanted out. Quietly, cleanly, and on my own terms. So I began collecting the pieces. Every small thing I had overlooked in the name of love or fear or whatever false sense of duty I'd been clinging to. I started pulling it into the light. I accessed our bank statements and started charting the transfers she'd made. They were all there, hidden in plain sight, just as her notebook said. I called the credit union and requested a printed copy of our joint account records. I told them I was applying for a home loan and needed to verify transactions. No red flags. No questions. Just data. That was the thing about being boring and dependable. People didn't suspect you were quietly preparing for the storm. Next, I called in a favor from Jonah, an old college friend who now worked in property management. He helped me find the condo. Nolan's building. Unit 5B. Trina had listed it under her maiden name. She must have thought no one would notice. But I did. And when I drove past the building on a Wednesday afternoon, I saw a familiar car parked outside. His car. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I already knew. What mattered more was when. She planned to leave in early October, 2 weeks from now. According to her notes, she wanted to wait until after our anniversary, just in case Carlton does something dramatic. I guess a dinner reservation and an overpriced bottle of wine counted as dramatic to her. She even left herself a note in all caps. Stay emotionless. Do not let guilt get in the way. That line nearly made me vomit. All these years I thought she was distant because of stress or unresolved grief or just life wearing us both down. But no, she was methodically removing herself from the marriage while keeping me on autopilot. I wasn't her husband. I was the placeholder until she was ready to move on. But now, I was done being her placeholder. The first thing I did was move half the money out of our remaining joint savings, legally and cleanly. She hadn't drained everything, but she was getting close. I created my own account and left just enough for appearances. If she checked the balance, she'd think it was just regular spending. I also made a copy of the notebook. Every page. I didn't know if I'd need it, but I wasn't taking chances. I called a divorce attorney. I didn't want to, but I had to. She was preparing a clean break, and if I wasn't ready, I'd be left with nothing, not even my name. The lawyer, a calm woman named Dana who specialized in complex exits, listened for 20 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, she asked me just one question. Do you want to burn her life down, or do you want to walk away with yours still intact? I paused, then said, I just want to feel like a person again. She nodded. Then we'll take the second path. Over the next few days, I rehearsed the version of myself that Trina expected to see. The husband who shrugged off her coldness, who made her coffee just how she liked it, who took out the trash and folded the towels the way she preferred. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch when she texted from the other room instead of speaking to me directly. But behind the curtain, I was preparing. I booked a storage unit. Began taking boxes of my old books and journals and clothes, one at a time, during my lunch breaks. I told Trina I was decluttering. She barely nodded. Cassie checked in every evening. We didn't talk about love. We didn't talk about what-ifs. She just listened, held space, offered me clarity. She reminded me, gently and repeatedly, that I didn't owe Trina a grand confrontation. I didn't have to give her a dramatic ending she could twist into a story about how I snapped. No, she would get silence. She would get absence. And that would say more than 1,000 angry words ever could. I woke up before her. That wasn't unusual. I always did. What made this morning different was that it was our anniversary. 7 years married. Not a small number. Not something to breeze past with a text and a bottle of clearance champagne. But I already knew how she'd planned to handle it. Nothing. Or maybe something hollow and performative for the sake of appearances. Dinner at a place we'd been to too many times, forced laughter, a gift card in a gold envelope with no handwritten message. That had become her version of love. Polite indifference. But I had other plans. I got out of bed silently. She didn't stir. I stood there for a moment watching her, not out of affection. That part of me had withered long ago, but because I realized I wasn't looking at my wife anymore. I was looking at a stranger who'd spent years learning my patterns just to use them as camouflage. Her betrayal wasn't an act of passion. It was clinical, strategic, the kind that requires patience. The kind that doesn't care how deeply it cuts because it's already planning the next move before you even feel the knife. Downstairs, everything was ready. The envelope sat neatly on the dining table, sealed, angled just slightly. Not messy, but not too perfect either. I'd spent days obsessing over how to leave it. The placement, the weight of it, how the light would hit it when she came down the stairs. I know how Trina thinks. I knew she'd spot it before she even smelled the coffee. Inside was everything. A printed copy of the exit plan notebook I found. The banking records. Screenshots of messages she thought she'd deleted from her phone. Because yes, I recovered those too. But I didn't lead with proof. I led with a letter. 4 pages long. Handwritten. I wasn't cruel. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I just told the truth. I told her I had known for weeks. That I'd watched her laugh about me with people who barely knew my name. That I'd heard her call me a charity case. That I'd stood in the hallway of Maybelline's house while Cassie, her best friend, said out loud what I hadn't had the courage to believe, that I deserved better. I told her about the money I'd taken back, the account I'd opened, the lawyer I'd hired, the things I'd packed. I told her I was leaving not because of the affair, but because of the years before it, the years where I stayed loyal to someone who treated me like a malfunctioning appliance. Something you put up with because it still technically works. I ended the letter with one line. By the time you read this, I'll already be gone. And for once, you won't know where I went. And I meant it. I took nothing but 2 suitcases, my passport, my documents, my laptop, and a backpack of essentials. Everything else, the house, the furniture, the vacation photos, the wedding album she hadn't touched in 3 years, it all stayed. Like a shell she could fill with whatever version of herself she planned to be next. I drove straight to a cabin 2 hours north. One Cassie's cousin had lent me for a month. No rent. No questions. Just a quiet escape surrounded by pine trees and silence. I didn't check my phone. I didn't look at my email. I let the stillness speak. When I finally did turn my phone back on, I had 27 missed calls. 15 from Trina. 7 from her mother. 5 from unknown numbers. There were 3 voicemails. I didn't listen to the first 2, but the third was different. It was Cassie. Her voice was shaking. Not scared, just heavy, like she'd carried something all day that had finally cracked under the weight. She found the letter, Cassie said. She called me, screamed, blamed me for everything, told me I was a traitor, that you were never strong enough to plan something like that without help. There was a pause, a shaky breath. But I didn't help you plan it, Carlton. That was all you. I just told the truth. You're the one who finally stood up. And then, her voice softened. She didn't know you had it in you. But I did. I sat on the deck of that cabin for a long time after the call ended, watching the trees sway like they didn't care that my life had just exploded. For the first time in years, I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry. I was free. It was the sound of tires on gravel that gave her away. I was halfway through splitting kindling behind the cabin, the kind of slow, manual task that calms the mind because it forces you to focus on just one thing, the next swing. The crisp air bit at my face, and the scent of pine resin stuck to my gloves. It was quiet. Beautifully, deafeningly quiet. I hadn't spoken to another human in 4 days. I hadn't needed to. So when I heard the crunch of tires and the slow hum of a familiar engine, my body froze before my mind caught up. I didn't look right away. I didn't need to. The second I heard the door slam, I knew it was her. Trina. She didn't call out. She didn't scream or throw anything. That might have been easier. No, she just stood there at the edge of the trees with her arms folded, wearing the same beige trench coat she wore to client meetings, like she was still in control, still handling something beneath her. When I finally turned and faced her, she tilted her head and gave a bitter half-smile. "So this is where you went to find your spine?" she said, scanning the cabin like it offended her. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of dragging me into one of her emotional chess matches. I took off my gloves slowly and set them on the log beside me. Then I waited. She walked toward me, her heels clicking against the wood porch like punctuation marks in a lecture she hadn't started yet. "You humiliated me, Carlton," she said. "You left me without a word. After everything I put into our marriage." That line snapped something in me. "Everything you put in?" I interrupted, not shouting, just letting the words hang in the air like smoke. "You mean the backup escape fund? The affair you thought I wouldn't notice? The version of me you built in front of your friends, just so you could feel more impressive next to me?" Her jaw clenched. I could see the rehearsed retorts stacking behind her teeth, but for once, she held them back. Maybe because she realized I wasn't the same man she walked over 2 weeks ago. "I didn't come here to fight," she said finally, her voice quieter now, more controlled. "I came because you owe me closure." That word, closure, tasted like ash. I stepped forward, slowly, carefully, like I was approaching something fragile but venomous. Closure is something you ask for when you're trying to clean your conscience. Not when you've spent years building an exit and then got mad that I beat you to the door. She looked away then, just for a second, and that tiny glance to the side, that was the first time I'd seen her flinch in years. "What do you want, Trina?" I asked, not with anger, but with exhaustion. "You've won. You've already moved on. You've already made me the villain in whatever version of the story you're telling now." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat down on the wooden steps like she couldn't hold up the armor anymore. "I didn't expect you to leave me like that," she said quietly. "No note. No warning. Just gone." "That's how it felt being married to you," I said. "Except it took 7 years. There was a long silence between us then. A kind of silence that didn't come from the absence of words, but from the weight of everything we had never said out loud." She turned to me suddenly, her voice brittle. "Did you and Cassie plan this? You two smug behind my back, laughing at how stupid I am?" That question told me everything. She wasn't here to apologize. She wasn't here to understand. She was here to reclaim control over a narrative that no longer obeyed her. "No," I said flatly. "Cassie told me the truth. Something you avoided for years. That's it." She stared at me, and for a brief second, her eyes flickered, not with love, not even regret, but with something close to confusion. Like she couldn't comprehend that I'd changed without her permission. "I don't love him, you know," she said suddenly. "Nolan." She nodded. "That's not really the point anymore," I said. She stood up abruptly, brushing imaginary dust off her coat. "I guess I was right then. You really are different." "Not different," I said. "Just finally done." She walked back to her car without another word. No apology. No plea. No dramatic collapse into tears. Just the quiet arrogance of someone who lost something and couldn't admit they wanted it back only because they didn't get to discard it first. The engine started. The gravel crunched. And she was gone. I didn't watch her drive away. I just turned, picked up my gloves, and went back to splitting kindling. Because for once, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. The day after Trina drove away from the cabin without looking back, I received a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A real, handwritten letter in a yellow envelope slipped under the door while I was out on a walk. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Cassie. She didn't knock. She didn't call. She just left the letter and disappeared. Inside was a single page. No drama. No big, sweeping romantic declarations. Just quiet truth, like always with her. "I didn't tell you everything back then because I didn't want to influence your decision. I wanted you to leave Trina for yourself, not for me. But now that you've found your own strength, if you ever want to sit across from someone who sees you fully, someone who already respects the man you've become, I'll be at that same bookstore cafe on Sunday. No expectations. Just coffee. And honesty." I sat there with the letter in my hands for what felt like an hour. The wind outside was shaking the trees like it wanted them to let go of everything dead and dry. I think that's what I had been doing too, letting go of every piece of the man Trina molded, every version of myself I bent just to be enough for someone who never planned to stay. When Sunday came, I drove. I didn't overthink it. I didn't rehearse what to say. I just got in the car and headed to the cafe. Cassie was already there, sitting by the window, a book in one hand, a cup of tea in the other. She looked up when I walked in and gave me the kind of smile that doesn't ask for anything. It simply welcomes you back to yourself. We talked for hours. Not about Trina. Not about pain. We talked about books, music, childhood regrets, what it feels like to start over when you thought your story was already written. There was no big kiss, no cheesy moment with violins playing in the background, but there was peace, and real laughter, and something new, something that didn't feel like a rescue, but a beginning. Over the next few months, I filed for divorce. Trina didn't contest it. In fact, she didn't say anything at all. Just one final email confirming the paperwork had gone through. That was it. No war. Just quiet surrender. And now? Now I rent a little townhouse on the other side of the city. I still organize the spice rack. Still cry during movie trailers. Still talk too much when I get nervous. But I don't apologize for it anymore. Cassie and I still meet every Sunday at that same cafe. Some days we just read side by side and don't say much at all. And for the first time in years, I feel like I belong. Not because someone tolerates me, but because I'm finally showing up as me. So no, I'm not broken. I was just buried. And now, I'm breathing again. Have you ever had a moment like this, where one sentence, one person, or one truth changed everything for you? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. You're watching Reddit Confessions, where real stories hit deeper than fiction. If this one moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more.